Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's world collapsed when CNN alerted her to Senator Bernie Sanders' $80 million defamation lawsuit against her. The progressive star, who had risen from the Bronx to become the youngest congresswoman in American history, now faced a career-threatening legal challenge unlike anything she had encountered before. Known for championing the Green New Deal, universal health care, and her commanding social media presence, AOC had built her reputation on confrontational politics that made her a frequent target for conservatives, and sometimes even for fellow progressives who felt she pushed the envelope too far. In Senator Sanders, however, she faced a different kind of opponent. A decades-long fixture in progressive politics, revered for his unwavering principles, his booming voice, and his reputation for calling out corruption on both sides of the aisle. Though ideologically aligned in many ways, Sanders was no stranger to public clashes with allies when he felt integrity or facts were at stake. His lawsuit wasn't launched with fanfare or showmanship, but with a quiet intensity and a 40-page legal brief filled with footnotes and transcripts. The legal battle stemmed from an Instagram livestream where AOC had accused Sanders, without presenting concrete evidence, of accepting illegal contributions from oil corporations in order to stall environmental legislation. "She's betraying the people's future for billionaire interests," she declared with unwavering conviction to her audience, igniting an immediate online storm. Within hours, the lawsuit dominated media coverage. Hashtags exploded on both sides. "Just Stand with AOC" clashed with "That Facts Matter," and news panels speculated whether this signaled a deep fracture within the progressive movement. At first, AOC dismissed the legal action as a dramatic overreaction, a political hit job even. What she hadn't expected was the sheer volume of documentation that Sanders's legal team assembled, a meticulous dossier tracing the timeline of her remarks and the absence of substantiating proof. The progressive icon now found herself in the most consequential legal challenge of her political career, against an opponent whose entire public life had been built on truth-telling and unshakable credibility. The controversy had begun 3 weeks earlier, during a spontaneous Instagram live session viewed by over 200,000 people. Thousands of comments poured in as AOC passionately discussed clean energy policy. When a viewer asked why major environmental bills kept stalling in the Senate, AOC didn't hesitate to name names. She zeroed in on Sanders, gesturing with energy and fire. "His pockets are overflowing with oil money. That's why progress is frozen. That's why we're still debating basic science." She didn't stop there. With bold defiance, she called it a betrayal of our planet, and suggested he should be renamed Senator Big Oil to make his allegiances clear. Her followers flooded the chat with encouragement. "Preach! Drag him! Say it louder!" Energized by their support, she doubled down, believing her statements to be righteous anger rather than risky allegation. But for Sanders, who had spent his career fighting corporate greed and fossil fuel influence, these claims struck at the core of his political identity. Her accusations were not only false, he believed. They were defamatory, reckless, and damaging to the very causes they supposedly shared. And unlike typical political sparring this time, he wouldn't let it slide. AOC, who had long been the Bronx's symbol of political disruption and defiance, had never feared speaking her mind. Her stunning 2018 defeat of Joe Crowley had taught her that boldness could reshape power. Her rise had been meteoric, her voice unmistakable, her digital following massive. She believed the live stream was just another rallying cry for justice. She never imagined it would lead to a federal court, facing off against one of the most respected progressives in American history, with $80 million and her political future on the line. Meanwhile, in Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders observed the situation unfold with steely composure. His 5 decades of legal, political, and grassroots activism told him this was no ordinary social media controversy. Sitting quietly in his Burlington office, surrounded by books and campaign posters from past presidential runs, Sanders watched AOC's live stream clip on a modest tablet, eyes narrowed not with anger, but with the focused scrutiny of a man who'd seen too much misinformation go unchallenged. As a longtime independent who caucused with Democrats, yet often challenged party orthodoxy, Sanders had built his reputation not on loyalty to any machine, but on principle. He was a fierce critic of corporate greed, a tireless advocate for working families, and someone who never hesitated to speak truth to power, even when it meant confronting his own allies. The following day, Sanders stood before a podium at a community center in Barra, Vermont, surrounded not by corporate lobbyists, but by renewable energy workers and union representatives, a deliberate choice that reflected his lifelong commitment to labor and the environment. Dressed in his usual rumpled blazer, tie slightly askew, he spoke not with theatrical flair, but with conviction. This isn't about ego, it's about truth. It's about accountability. And I intend to pursue that through the legal system. Media reaction was immediate and polarizing. Fox News ran the headline, "Sanders sues AOC for spreading lies," while MSNBC treaded more carefully, emphasizing the broader implications of intra-progressive conflict. Meanwhile, AOC took to Twitter with characteristic fire. "Trying to silence criticism of fossil fuel money in politics won't work. I won't back down." Her statement drew massive engagement, some praising her defiance, others warning she had crossed a dangerous line. Just days later, Sanders's legal team filed a meticulous 60-page defamation complaint in federal court. The document argued that AOC's livestream had not only contained falsehoods, but had been deliberately crafted to undermine Sanders's reputation in the progressive movement. His lead attorney, a First Amendment specialist known for past victories against major networks, claimed that AOC's remarks strayed beyond protected speech into calculated defamation. The political world was rocked when the complaint included a bombshell, a leaked internal email from AOC's team that would become the crux of Sanders's case. Having spent decades navigating both courtroom and campaign trail, Sanders had taken a slow and measured approach. Unlike AOC's rapid-fire digital reaction, Sanders had moved cautiously, evaluating the law, building his case, and waiting for the precise moment to act. He knew that to win a defamation suit against a high-profile public figure like Ocasio-Cortez, he would need to prove actual malice, a notoriously difficult legal bar, but the email helped tip the scale. In it, AOC had written to a media advisor, "Bernie obstructs progress on clean energy legislation at every opportunity. We need to discredit him before he causes further environmental damage." The most damning line followed. "Find any information, true or not, to demonstrate he's betraying Vermont voters." That phrase, "true or not," became the sharpest tool in Sanders' legal arsenal. When the lawsuit and email were made public, media coverage intensified rapidly. Conservative outlets accused AOC of dishonesty. Progressive voices were more restrained but anxious. Even CNN and MSNBC legal analysts acknowledged the severity. "If that email is authentic," one analyst noted, "it introduces clear evidence of malicious intent." That could make this one of the rare defamation cases with real traction. Back in her Capitol Hill office, AOC felt the walls close in. Her base still stood with her, but the foundation beneath her political persona had begun to shake. The email had caught her team completely off guard. She gathered her senior advisors for a late-night strategy session. Tensions ran high. Some urged transparency and contrition, issue a public apology, acknowledge the overstep, and negotiate a settlement before more damage was done. AOC, characteristically unyielding, chose a different approach to address the growing crisis despite the risks involved. She published a lengthy Twitter thread asserting that the leaked email had been selectively edited and misrepresented by her opponents to damage her reputation. "Powerful forces are trying to silence my fight against fossil fuel money in politics," she wrote defiantly, refusing to retreat. Her statements received tens of thousands of supportive responses from loyal followers, but at the same time ignited fresh criticism from legal experts across the political spectrum. "She's digging herself deeper," commented a former federal prosecutor on MSNBC. "She's giving Bernie Sanders more material to strengthen his case, especially when the court is examining intent." Meanwhile, Sanders continued to handle the storm with his signature restraint and seriousness. He appeared at town halls and labor union meetings across Vermont, maintaining a steady tone of accountability rather than vengeance. At a Burlington event, standing before a group of young climate activists and union leaders, he addressed the matter plainly. "I take no joy in this situation. I have no animosity toward Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. But when someone with a massive platform spreads falsehoods, deliberately or recklessly, it cannot go unanswered. Accountability is not cruelty. It's justice." Back on Capitol Hill, the atmosphere in AOC's office had turned heavy and uncertain. Once decorated with bright posters and memories of a political revolution, the walls now seemed to echo a different message, one of vulnerability, not victory. AOC, once the electrifying force of the progressive movement, now stood on unsteady ground, watching her influence waver and her alliances thin. But what stung most wasn't Republican attacks. It was the cold distance from trusted allies. AOC had expected solidarity from the Democratic Party, especially its progressive flank. Instead, the response was chilling silence. In a closed-door Financial Services Committee meeting, where she once held powerful sway, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi acknowledged the lawsuit only in passing. "We must stay focused on delivering for the American people," she said, eyes avoiding AOC's. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, when questioned by reporters, gave a similarly evasive answer. "This matter will play out through the proper legal process." Their neutrality was unmistakable. AOC realized she was no longer seen as a political asset, but a potential liability. Even among those she considered ideological kin, the support grew faint. Bernie Sanders, once her mentor and ally, issued only a measured public comment. "Political dialogue must be rooted in truth, and we must all be careful to base our claims on facts. That's how we preserve integrity." He did not name her. Ilhan Omar posted a cryptic tweet about holding space for both truth and unity, while Rashida Tlaib refused to comment when questioned by reporters at a Michigan event. The signals were subtle, but the message was clear. She was on her own. On social media, once her strongest fortress, the cracks were growing. Twitter threads and Instagram reels debated not whether she was being silenced, but whether she had overstepped. Progressive influencers who had once praised her firebrand style now split into factions. Some stood by her, insisting the lawsuit was a calculated attempt to muzzle a powerful voice. But others, especially on TikTok, criticized her for reckless rhetoric, arguing she had handed conservatives a narrative weapon they would exploit for years. The sense of abandonment was suffocating. And for the first time since her meteoric rise, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez found herself without the movement's full backing. A viral video from a young progressive activist with over 2 million views dissected the leaked email and posed a haunting question. AOC represents the future of our movement, but why did she create this unnecessary vulnerability that could damage the entire cause? The comment section reflected the shifting tide. Remarks like, "She needs to apologize," and "Her arrogance got us here," began flooding in, steadily chipping away at her once unshakable public image. In an effort to reclaim the narrative, AOC went live again, this time hoping to reignite her base by projecting confidence despite growing internal uncertainty. Seated before a bookshelf filled with social justice classics and wearing her iconic Tax the Rich t-shirt, she looked directly into the camera and said with firm resolve, "This lawsuit isn't about facts. It's about silencing those who dare to speak out against systemic corruption. I will not be intimidated into submission." But this time, the reaction was different. Supportive comments still came in, but they were quickly overtaken by challenging questions. "Can you provide specific proof of Senator Sanders' supposed ties to fossil fuel money?" asked one viewer. Another pressed gently but firmly, "Why not just apologize and move forward?" The air of unquestioning devotion that once defined her online community was now fragmented, fraught with doubt and division. The sense of betrayal extended beyond followers. It seeped into the very structure of her team. Staffers who had worked tirelessly to craft her public brand began privately voicing frustration about her handling of the crisis. Internal cracks widened when a senior communications aide leaked to reporters that AOC had been explicitly warned against making unsupported accusations. "We told her to be careful with how she framed it," the aide claimed anonymously. But she believed her platform was untouchable. The leak gained traction quickly in outlets like The Hill and Politico, deepening the pressure already weighing heavily on AOC's office. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders' legal team advanced steadily and quietly, gaining momentum through methodical litigation. A key turning point came when a federal judge denied AOC's motion to dismiss the lawsuit, delivering Sanders his most decisive procedural win yet. In a detailed 12-page ruling, the judge noted that the internal communications from AOC's team offered sufficient indication of potential actual malice to justify a full trial. Right-wing media erupted. Headlines like "Court Hands Sanders' Major Win" and "AOC Case Moves Toward Full Trial" dominated cable news. A Fox News analyst declared, "Sanders isn't just winning this case. He's teaching a generation of political figures that speech has consequences." At the same time, Sanders' political stature grew. Though never one to relish the spotlight, he was invited to speak at progressive think tank events and legal ethics panels. During a radio appearance with NPR's On Point, Sanders recounted his journey from a Brooklyn-born civil rights protester to U.S. Senator, emphasizing how integrity had always been the cornerstone of his public service. "You don't build a movement on shortcuts," he said. "You build it on truth, and you protect that truth. Always." In the Senate, his colleagues, particularly among moderates and old-guard liberals, praised him for standing firm without resorting to smear tactics. "Bernie's showing us what it means to disagree with dignity," remarked Senator Sherrod Brown. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. As AOC scrambled to maintain control, fighting battles on multiple fronts, issuing increasingly defensive statements, Bernie Sanders remained composed, principled, and strategically focused. He avoided personal attacks, choosing instead to center his public comments on accountability and the broader need for truth in democratic discourse. The Nation summarized it this way: while AOC responded with fire, Sanders responded with discipline. One plays politics like it's performance art. The other plays it like it's chess. And right now, he's several moves ahead. As Bernie Sanders received standing ovations at legal ethics panels, progressive roundtables, and even bipartisan forums praising principled leadership, AOC faced a mounting personal crisis. The media scrutiny was unrelenting. Every morning began with dozens of notifications, press inquiries, and messages from increasingly worried advisors, replacing the affirmations and digital applause that once filled her inbox. Conservative media outlets labeled her a fraud, whose words had finally caught up to her. But even traditionally sympathetic publications began to turn. The New York Times ran a somber op-ed dissecting her strategic misjudgments, while the Washington Post published a viral piece titled, "When Social Media Clout Can't Outrun Legal Reality," asking whether she had vastly overestimated the protective power of digital popularity. On TikTok, where AOC had once ruled political discourse with viral clarity, mocking videos spread like wildfire. One particularly brutal clip edited her original livestream with explosion sound effects and a caption reading, "When your social justice monologue backfires." It racked up over 20 million views in just a few days. Alone in her D.C. apartment on sleepless nights, AOC scrolled endlessly through Twitter and Instagram, searching for encouragement, but finding instead a relentless flood of judgment. One particularly painful comment on Instagram read, "You were our future. Now you just talk before thinking." The anonymous jab cut deeper than any attack from her political enemies. It came from someone she once believed was part of her movement. The fallout spread into her personal life. Her family in the Bronx became targets of tabloid harassment. Her mother, Blanca, was forced to keep the blinds drawn as photographers staked out their building. Private security was hired for their safety, further straining already stretched finances. Legal costs had ballooned to over $1.5 million in just weeks. Advisors warned her that even a partial judgment in Sanders's favor could lead to personal bankruptcy and the dismantling of everything she had built. Reluctantly, she sold her Washington apartment and moved into a modest rental, a bitter irony for someone who had once embodied the possibility of upward mobility through conviction and activism. In her most private moments, AOC faced a sobering truth. She had underestimated Bernie Sanders, not as a mentor, but as a methodical and principled public figure who would not let serious accusations slide unchallenged. She had assumed social capital could protect her from legal consequence, but the email leak had shattered that illusion permanently. Though she briefly considered issuing a public apology, her pride and ideological commitment kept her from doing so. Instead, under growing pressure from party leadership and media inquiries, she stepped down from her leadership role on the House Financial Services Committee. In a short Instagram video, she said, "I need to refocus on the priorities of my constituents and manage these legal challenges with clarity and accountability." She tried to frame the move as responsible, but most observers saw it as retreat. Political analysts called it the end of an era. Her congressional seat remained intact, but the aura that once made her a lightning rod of inspiration had dimmed. The defamation case became a permanent shadow in her political biography. The progressive movement, too, suffered collateral damage. Her fall made rising activists more cautious. Where once they had wielded social media like a sword, now they hesitated, unsure of the legal boundary. "She showed us what was possible," one young organizer told The Intercept. "But she also reminded us that our platforms don't make us immune from responsibility." Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders' stature rose higher than ever. Once dismissed by centrists as too radical, he was now being embraced across the spectrum as a figure of moral discipline and institutional respect. Invitations poured in for keynote addresses, legal panels, and ethics summits. The very lawsuit that had once seemed like a political minefield had elevated him into a new echelon of national leadership. The lawsuit solidified Bernie Sanders' standing not within the Republican Party, but as an unlikely icon of institutional accountability, even among centrists and legal traditionalists weary of online political theatrics. While he remained fiercely independent, his principled approach earned him invitations to high-profile speaking engagements, from academic symposiums on digital ethics to bipartisan panels on public discourse, raising millions for progressive candidates and civic education programs across the country. A Wall Street Journal editorial remarked, "Sanders turned what began as a personal legal battle into a case study on how public figures can defend their reputations not through outrage, but through due process." In Vermont, Clean energy workers and longtime supporters applauded him not just as a senator, but as a guardian of integrity in an era of viral misinformation. He didn't yell, one union member said. He just stood his ground and proved it's possible to fight lies with truth. The lawsuit widened America's ideological fault lines. Sanders and AOC, once allies, were now involuntarily cast as symbols of two conflicting approaches: principled institutionalism versus impulsive digital activism, progressivism versus performative politics, legal accountability versus online virality. Political analysts voiced concern over the implications. Are we entering an era where politicians sue each other for clout? One expert asked on PBS. That's not just about accountability. It risks undermining public discourse altogether. A New Yorker editorial warned, "When elected leaders drag political speech into the courts, we chip away at democracy's essential space for free and open debate." Even some of Sanders' own supporters wondered whether his legal victory, though firmly grounded, had unintended consequences. And it had. Across Capitol Hill, a chilling effect took hold. Lawmakers from both parties began vetting their tweets, Instagram captions, and live stream topics through legal teams before posting. A DC-based consulting firm reported a 30% surge in demand for social media risk assessments in the weeks following the ruling. One Democratic senator confessed to Politico, "Nobody wants to be the next headline because of a bad tweet." This case changed everything. Globally, the lawsuit drew international attention. European publications examined it as a symptom of America's fractured political culture. When legislation yields to litigation, a British journalist wrote, democracy starts to hemorrhage. In Latin America, where AOC had once been viewed as a progressive inspiration, reactions turned to regret. A Brazilian organizer told El País, "We admired her courage to challenge the powerful. But now she reminds us that responsibility must accompany voice, especially in public life." The $80 million lawsuit left an enduring imprint on American politics. It revealed that influence, however well-branded, cannot replace accountability. AOC's fall wasn't just political. It was symbolic of a broader cultural shift. Her story became a warning that in the digital age, one poorly chosen phrase can demolish a carefully built legacy. Bernie Sanders, by contrast, emerged not as a digital juggernaut, but as a reminder that slow, methodical strategy often prevails over noise. He didn't win by going viral. He won by staying grounded, measured, and deliberate. Through the courts, not the clicks, this confrontation was more than personal. It reflected the very tensions tearing at American democracy: hyperpolarization, the power of platforms, and the cost of careless communication in an overstimulated world. And perhaps the most essential lesson, that in a democracy under strain, freedom of speech must always walk hand in hand with personal responsibility. That in a world where every word can echo across the globe in seconds, public figures and private citizens must verify before they amplify. Click subscribe to follow future high-stakes political confrontations shaping our democratic future. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may we speak with care and lead with integrity. God bless you, and God bless America.